All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast here for the week of May 25th, 2025. This is episode 387, and I am so glad to be back. My word, it has been a number of weeks. I've been traveling, family commitments, traveling again. But I am so glad to be back. Game Logic, thank you for keeping everything going. You and Towmaster99 have had some great conversations. Last week, some good conversations around Doom, the Dark Ages, and lots of other news. And as we do every week here on the Enough to Keep Going podcast, we will talk about our kind of main big games of the week. Then we'll do a little bit of a news wrap up, and we will go into everything else, or at least some highlights of what else we've been playing. Because for me, after being off for 3 weeks, I've been playing a lot. So I'm going to try to hit some highlights as we go through the night. But before I get to Game Logic, I just want to say congratulations to all the Battlefront 2 players over this week who have brought it up over their previous Steam concurrent counts. Highest amount was 11,000, 12,000 concurrents. And yesterday during Resurgence Day, they had over 18,000. It hit number 5 on PlayStation. So they were really pushing for some activity in Battlefront 2, which the last update Battlefront 2 got was back in 2020, actually. And all the way back in 2017, we talked about it plenty during its launch and all the card system and loot box aspects. But it is relatively cheap out there for everybody. And maybe it was just a continuation of Star Wars Day back at the beginning of May, but we have some devs from Battlefront 2 who have been tweeting out relating to the willingness or interest in a Battlefront 3. I doubt anything's really going to happen, but at the same time, it's fun to see kind of a community resurgence over a game that's 8 years old at this point, or 7.5 years old. So we're not going to spend too much time talking about 7.5-year-old games tonight, but I just wanted to call that out as a nice community highlight for things that have been going on. Game Logic, how have you been doing over the past week?
I've been doing good, man. I've been playing a lot of games.
All right. Well, let's
get a lot of games, but playing not a lot of games in terms of number, but just
you've been playing a lot of time with a few number of games, and I'm guessing one of those is the one you talked about last week, which is Doom, the Dark Ages. So I had been playing it a little bit as well. I've been playing it on PC, on the Xbox launcher through Game Pass. Really enjoying the kind of flow and rhythm of combat. You and Tao talked about this a little bit last week in terms of, kind of the aspect of the shooting, using your shield to get up close, doing a little bit of melee, doing a finishing move, kind of there's a real rhythm to it, and which is really enjoyable in terms of combat. But you've been getting into it more. Last week you had played more than Tao, and I'm going to believe that this week you've been playing even more. So how has your time been as you progress further into Doom, the Dark Ages?
That's been good. Tao may have caught me because actually I spent more time playing Doom Eternal this week than Doom the Dark Ages, and not for any particular reason, just because I've been trying to record some video and game capture of my replay of Doom Eternal, so that production time has caused me to scale a little differently. So I haven't played Doom the Dark Ages since earlier in the week.
Before we get into Doom, having played both of them kind of in close proximity to each other, let's talk a little bit about the comparison in terms of the flow of combat, the mechanics. You've been playing both a significant amount on PC, and so I'm curious on how they compare. Doom 2016, or no, Doom Eternal is 2019?
I think it was 2019, 2020.
That sounds about right. So, how does that compare to Doom: The Dark Ages?
Surprisingly, I'm finding that Doom Eternal, which I've long lauded as being a game that I've hated, or at least have a very bittersweet relationship with, where I finished the game and somebody posted earlier this week to, I think, completion numbers of Doom: The Dark Ages, or maybe even just like a time marker of like by platform who's put in like 4.4 hours or more, something like that, or as achievements or something. I can't remember. But on Steam, actually, like only 33%, like a third, slightly less than a third of players have completed Doom Eternal. And so I suspect that in a Souls-like way, right, that lots of people bought it, but not a ton of people remained engaged with it or finished it. And so I have this relationship where I'm happy / pleased that I stuck with it and finished it. But like I up until this past week, I have really I hate it like any time that I'm in it, and I haven't even hit Marauders yet.
I remember you talking about kind of not being satisfied with the flow of combat back in the day when you initially played it.
Well, I'm satisfied in a certain way, like it's sufficient. It is the it's a very naggy game. Like it, you'll rip and tear a demon to replenish your health to max, and then literally like 15 seconds later the little warning we do alarm is going off that you're back at low health, right? So, and then you'll replenish your ammo, and then like 10 seconds later every weapon will be out of ammo. Like today, like every weapon was out of ammo but the rocket launcher. Now you would like to think that that's good, but when you're fighting in a tight quarters fight, right, with the little demons who aren't like big and don't have a ton of hit points, like you really don't want to you don't want to get jump scared and wind up like firing a rocket, just out of the jump scare, right? You don't want to do that in close proximity to yourself and get splash damage. Like it's just has so many things that are kind of nuisances that's what really kind of grates on you. But I have found with this playthrough, I think I've tried to find the drum beat a little more, to where in my first playthrough, certain actions that I did were emergent. Like I would chainsaw an enemy when I had to, like when I ran out of ammo. I would hit somebody with the shoulder mounted flamethrower when I had to because I was out of armor. I was low on life. I would rip and tear, things like when I had to. But this time around, I'm doing those things kind of more deliberately and more on a kind of regular drum beat. And so there's almost kind of a bit of a rhythm to the way I'm playing the game. And where I don't I have that kind of Destiny kind of gameplay where in my first run through, I would, in Destiny 2, you never use your ultimate. Like it's sick, it's sad after so many years. And sometimes you don't use it until you have to, right?
Right. Yep.
And so I would tend to like never chainsaw anyone until I saw the little can of fuel, because it's very super frustrating to like chainsaw someone and then go to chainsaw someone again and the blasted thing is out of fuel already. So and so it's always Doom Eternal, I think, deserves a slightly fairer shake. I actually think too that there's greater enemy variety in particular than I see in Doom: The Dark Ages. But Doom: The Dark Ages also feels good. And it's not as naggy a game. It's a lot more free flowing. It lets you get to the fun a lot easier without having a ton of friction, like between you and really enjoying the game. But probably the chocolate icing on the cake, right, is these set piece moments. I mean, kind of in almost Halo franchise ways. You know how Halo, got its reputation for being this thing of like big set pieces, and the levels where you pilot the mech and then where you fly the dragon, especially, are these big set piece moments where the mechanics are a little different, so you get a little more variety. You're not just shooting and sprinting and all those types of things. And I feel it was a little weird. I think I mentioned it to Tao. I don't think I called the person out exactly, but I was listening to maybe Podcast Unlocked, I think, where the guy at IGN reviewed it, and just like the things he was mentioning, I was like, what? He was like, you have way more weapon variety in or you have way more tools in Doom Eternal. And I'm like, what? Like, no, like you're forced to use them a lot more in Doom Eternal. I think is probably the thing that he was feeling. Like in Doom the Dark Ages, you have the shield, you have the shoulder barge with the shield. You're able to throw the shield. You get power ups to where you start being able to bounce the shield around like Captain America. I feel like the weapons variety you get happens a lot faster than it does in Doom Eternal. And then you just simply have the fact that like whenever you jump from a height and land on the ground, you kind of do this superhero landing, right? That does splash damage to all the demons around you. So I feel like you have way more tools in Doom the Dark Ages than you do in Doom Eternal, or maybe at least the same amount. So I didn't feel like that was any different. And then the person mentioned Doom Eternal is a faster game than Doom the Dark Ages. And let me say that one more time so I confused it. He was saying Doom Eternal is a faster game than Doom the Dark Ages. And I'm like, what? No. In Doom the Dark Ages, you can just spam the sprint button. There's no stamina meter.
It definitely feels fast, right?
In Doom Eternal, there's no sprint button. You're constantly kind of clunking around. Like you can dash, but the dash is really meant for you to use in the platforming sequences. And so, largely you don't. I find that you tend not to use it in combat in Doom Eternal that much unless you're desperate, like unless you're trying to get away from something. And the dash isn't as effective in getting away from something in any means than the sprint is in Doom the Dark Ages. So it was really some kind of wackadoodle perspectives on the game. But yeah, I'm continuing to have fun with it. Like I said, the dragon sequence was in particular, really awesome set piece. And you get mini boss battles along the way. The shield feels really good. I also love the fact that when you go to throw the shield, it's kind of a bullet time effect, right? So it slows time down, and then allows you to wing the shield. So, and then I think I mentioned it how I've played it across a few different hardware sets, and the game plays beautifully. I think the only place I haven't played it is on a 3080 Ti, and Tao was mentioning that he was having some performance problems on his 3070. I can't remember if he has a 3070 or a 3070 Ti. But either way, I mean the 3070 Ti, even which is the card that I just kind of pushed out of the test set, right? Because I brought in a card at the top, and so the 3070 Ti was the lowest one. It's an 8 GB VRAM card. So when developers are targeting 16 GB VRAM as the baseline because of the consoles, then this is why you're hearing all the lamentations of 8 GB cards struggling. But in particular, Doom the Dark Ages has ray tracing, and there's no way to turn it off, so it's on by default. And so
I remember you talking about that last week. Yeah, I've been playing it. I've got a 3060, but I only have a 1080 display for a monitor, so I'm not kind of wrestling with those kind of limitations in terms of ray tracing, and it's been running really buttery smooth on a 1080, and it's been good, high quality, but I could see where if they still haven't patched it where you can turn some of those features off in terms of ray tracing, it could definitely kind of create a slog, really bog down things.
Yeah, and in the workstation where I have the 3080 Ti hooked up, same thing. It's driving 1080p monitor, so everything else that I'm playing over there. I've been playing Doom Eternal at that. That's actually where I've been doing video capture this week, and I've had no problems. The game's running at 170, 180 something frames per second. Again, that's Doom Eternal, but that is with ray tracing on. But yeah, dropping the resolution will definitely help you out in that area.
So you're enjoying Doom the Dark Ages. Why did you decide to bounce off that or to include Eternal into your rotation?
Yeah, so probably about 5 days before Doom the Dark Ages came out, I started a run of Doom Eternal, kind of as a warm-up for Doom the Dark Ages. I was actually, doing some Let's Play video capture at that time too. And so I've just continued that alongside Doom the Dark Ages, and so it's been super interesting playing them alongside. Like I said, I mean, if you basically split my time in half, right? I did 3 episodes of Let's Plays with Doom Eternal while I was playing Doom the Dark Ages in parallel, and then I've done 2 more episodes of what I call long plays, which is basically a Let's Play without all the whizdag doodles in the live stream overlay. And about in between those is about when my spirit started to kind of turn the corner on Doom Eternal, right? Where I was like, oh no, there's actually some sweetness to Doom Eternal that I didn't find the first time around. And maybe it's because of playing them in parallel that I've like seen more of the kind of goodness in between, in Doom Eternal. It's actually super interesting that I'm starting to scratch a little bit at the lore between the 3. Like you could definitely see the lore connect, like even as is the case, as is the case with most gamers, you kind of hear the lore of Doom going on in the background, but you don't pay any attention to it, and you have no idea, like, okay, whatever. But in Doom Eternal, you see like a hologram of King, I think it's Norvik, in the early outgoings of Doom Eternal, and then of course in Doom the Dark Ages, you see, right, King Norvik, right, in person. But it was actually interesting in continuing that playthrough of Doom Eternal, which seems like in a vastly different setting than Doom 2016 was. They mentioned Samuel Hayden, who of course is your antagonist in Doom 2016. So there you can see the lore across the 3, even though I can't entirely piece it together. But it's interesting that there is a common thread throughout the 3. Yeah, I think the big thing I'd mention, as the expansion on Doom the Dark Ages from last week is in Doom Eternal, even though, like I said, I'm starting to like Doom Eternal, there's still like things you can individually pick out and isolate and say that design decision is particularly aggravating, right, in Doom Eternal. I haven't really come across that yet in Doom the Dark Ages. And I'm still trying, like pondering and thinking, and it's I can't really particularly pick one out.
Nice. Well, I can see where kind of playing them in tandem together, you start to appreciate the design elements that are different than in both, right? And yeah, Doom Eternal, I remember it getting some knocks over Doom 2016 in terms of kind of the mechanics and the game flow. But I could see like so many things as I started the top of the hour with Battlefront, like, having the perspective of time and being able to see it in a different context rather than playing it in the moment, potentially, or simply just after patches, like how a game can play years down the road compared to the moment it's released is drastically different. Or the way that we experience a game years down the road can feel different because we bring different contexts to it and different experiences to it. So yeah, I love the fact that we've got the ability to talk about both of them in tandem. I think Doom the Dark Ages really, that the shield aspect of that and the combat of that feels totally different, or it feels a lot more physical than simply just the shooting and then the up close melee and finisher moves of the previous Doom. Simply just adding a shield in there, to me, has added a layer of nuance or depth to that gameplay that really hooks me nicely.
I will say I was sitting here thinking, I will say I think there is one thing that I can think of that is aggravating with that game is there is one enemy type in there who's not really like a different enemy type, but he's the demon is shielded, but then I don't know if it has like machine gun turrets, like it has like a little 4-barrel machine gun like installed in the shield or something like that. And that demon is a little aggravating because they're very difficult to pick out in the background. And sometimes in one case I've encountered one that was like up on like an elevated ledge that really wasn't apparent on how to get up to him. So there are times that those demons attack you, and it does this like animation on your HUD where you see your HUD kind of riddled with bullet holes, but there's like no tracer rounds or anything. So when it happens, you're like, where the heck is that coming from, right? And then you're trying to pick this, and they can hit you from a particularly long range away. So you're trying to pick them out on the background and figure out where it's happening. And sometimes you go behind cover, and then you inch around right to slightly reveal yourself to try and figure out where they're hitting you from. But that's, like I said, I think that's about the only thing I can think of.
Nice. Well, let's go from one big AAA game to something that is a whole lot smaller. One of the games I've been playing since I've been on the road this past weekend, I picked up Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tactical Takedown. So this is the strategy game from Strange Scaffold. So Strange Scaffold from I Am Your Beast, El Paso Elsewhere. The last time I was on, I was talking about Dinosaur Mansion 3. This is, it's a studio that has really produced a lot of games in a short period of time. And TMNT Tactical Takedown is actually, the mechanics of it are taken from another game that they've been working on in terms of Strange Scaffolding. There we go. But it ends up being that you play as an individual turtle, one of the four, and it's a grid-based combat system. You've got movement, you've got an attack, you've got a special. You can, you have kind of a push mechanic, like kicking with your foot, that can knock people off stages. And the way stages work, it feels very much like little miniature tabletop aspects, that they are, they kind of have this 3D aspect where they bounce around the playfield in terms of moving from one spot on the grid to the other. But as the level progresses, the map changes. So it's not a static map in types of like an XCOM or a Fire Emblem, that it gives you a little piece of the map, and after 2 turns, that map is going to change. That some of the back end of that map is going to fall off, and some of the front end of the map is going to be added. And so you're moving your way through a level, but with little chunks of the map each way. And so if you're playing too defensively, you're going to be warned that this part of the map is going to fall off. Or if you are staying away from certain things, there are other elements, even just in the tutorial, there's cars that will race through the street as you're going down the city street. Like it's TMNT. You play in the sewers, you play in the streets, you play in the rooftops. And so there's different like elemental or environmental hazards that happen as well. And as you go through, between each of your turtles, each have individual kind of special attacks in addition to their normal attack. Like Michelangelo has a skateboard that can jump across multiple spots on the board and kind of knock people as he goes. Donatello, being the science turtle, has got traps and kind of poison aspects and other kind of environmental hazards that he can lay down. And so there's different components within, that they play to that idea of movement, science, of kind of brute strength with Raphael, and you play through each level, each couple levels as one turtle, and then you move on to another turtle, and you kind of cycle back around. I haven't cycled back around yet. I'm still kind of playing through the first couple levels with each turtle as you progress through, but it's really enjoyable. It works great on the Steam Deck. It's that idea of playing a little strategy game, moving your characters around. It is not it's not overly punishing, but it also it's not going to lay down for you either. Like the first time I played through, even going through the tutorial, I died at one point in time just by not kind of completely utilizing the mechanics and kind of just sticking with a few kind of strategies and not kind of rotating those strategies or actually using strategies that play to the environment that I'm in. And so as I move through the sewers, one strategy seemed perfectly fine, and as I moved into the streets, that same strategy was not that, I took more damage. It was not nearly as defensible. I needed to kind of either be more aggressive and think about how I can chain together attacks and by placement. So as you attack, like if you think about it as a grid, I move to the space in front of an enemy, and if I defeat that enemy, I move on to that enemy square. But then if I haven't placed myself correctly, I can no longer, each turn you get 5 or 6 movement points that you can, go through. And so moving takes out 1 point, an attack takes out another point, special attack takes out some points. So you can chain a number of things together, but if you're not thinking ahead, if you're not thinking a few steps ahead, you can end up kind of out of range of the next opponent and still have some points left or not have enough points left to get over there to damage them. Or as I had enough points to get over there, but not to then follow up with an attack. And so, right, it's that strategy element of, yes, I have enough movement points left to move again, but do I move back out of the way so that 3 enemies can't converge on me? But then am I moving into a space where the level is falling off? And so there's this nice kind of push-pull aspect in terms of how, I was going to say, how much you can turtle, right? In terms of defense and kind of wait for things to come to you, and how much you need to be playing aggressively because the stage keeps moving. And so it allows, it's a $20 game. It's on sale for $18. I think right now $17.99, $15.99, somewhere in there. Like, it's technologically, graphically, it's not super fancy, but it does a lot within the mechanics that it's working with. And so I'm really enjoying it. I enjoy a strategy game. I enjoy the XCOM games. I enjoy the idea of digital chess in a variety of different ways. And so this feels very much in that aspect. It's a small game. It's bite size. It can play for 20 minutes to a half hour, kind of set it back down, come back again, because it also doesn't feel like I'm forgetting a number of my mechanics. The way things are laid out, the number of move sets you have, it's not like Clair Obscur, where if I'm setting it down for a few days and coming back, I have to think about, okay, not only my parries, but also all the inventory systems and the kind of I can't even think of what they're called, right? The little ghosts that are along with you and the elemental aspects. Like, this is a really nice kind of Steam Deck game, right? Set it down, play for a little bit, come back to it. It very much is. It plays along with that idea of, yeah, this is a tabletop game. You're going to play for a little bit. You're going to come back. It doesn't sound, reading the reviews, it doesn't sound like it's super long, 6 to 8 hours at the most. But again, I'm really enjoying it. It's a lot of fun, and it's kind of a neat little take in terms of playing with a franchise and doing something in that kind of strategy tactical game.
So DBQ, about how far are you into the game?
Oh, only about hour and a half, 90 minutes or so.
Okay. Have you run into any like popular, iconic, like TMNT, like characters, like in particular any bosses?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like the main bad guy is Baxter Stockman's in there. You get, the Shredder's daughter is one of the kind of main antagonists. I think I'm trying to remember. I've run into a few like the boss battles are not because it's a tactical game. There's not like huge kind of arcade boss battles where you're coming up against somebody, or even in the roguelike Hades aspect of whatever the TMNT game was that came out a little while ago. I have to go back and think about that, but that had a number of kind of classic bosses like the big crocodile. There's fewer bosses here that I've run into, but definitely characterization, it still fits within the, it is not the Saturday morning TMNT. It is not specific to one of the comic iterations in terms of IDW, but it feels authentic to kind of that world, even if it's kind of living in its own space. So it's not a direct pull, but it's using some of, like, even Baxter is a little different than you've seen him in other iterations.
And any like are the turtles like pretty much their their persona renditions a la Eastman and Laird, or like over the years, over the decades, right, since those characters have been around, you've seen instances of where there's been a slight angle on characters, in particular I think Raphael and Michelangelo, sometimes kind of making Raphael not the hothead, um constantly leaping before he looks, and always angry, but sometimes like I want to say was it the last Ronin where like he was the hothead, but he was also like a little more like he was hothead, but he was like a measured hothead, like if you know what I mean. um he was a hothead with like the years of experience under his belt. And so or is there anything like different in the characterization of any of the turtles in the game?
I mean, that's a good question, because it's not directly playing on one interpretation or the other, but it feels like Michelangelo still kind of has that kind of goofiness to him. It feels a little more mature than the most recent, like Mutant Mayhem, the Paramount Studios, Nickelodeon kind of animation one that came out a few years ago. In terms of kind of, it puts them a little bit later in their development, like they are experienced turtles. And part of the narrative is actually kind of interesting in that way, is that it puts them all out in individual settings, and so part of the dynamic is figuring out how they manage kind of independence and how they kind of fight on their own. And so, and I think you've seen this in other iterations where Raphael will feel like he needs to strike out on his own because nobody's listening to him. Or the kind of hothead aspect of that, where this feels a little more mature in that way. Like he is not necessarily lashing out, but kind of, they all feel like they're trying to figure things out in terms of it almost is set like post-teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? Like that they're not quite teenagers anymore, and they're trying to figure out kind of how they exist independently of each other, where and so in some ways it does create a little bit different of an identity and narrative aspect of it. This is not a huge narrative game. It is, still 2D kind of cartoon panels and dialogue boxes that come up. So this is, don't go into this looking for a huge deep story. This is very much a gameplay based game, but it does feel to really nail. It feels authentic in terms of kind of capturing the spirit of the Turtles in a different way that isn't always shown. All right, Game Logic, we're ready to move into some news headlines. Nate and Hero Down Under, so nice to have you. Actually, it's just nice for me to be here to welcome you, because I have been gone probably longer than you have. So it's good to have chat back in, and we're always glad to have people listening and communicating with us as we go through. Feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat. We're always we'll try to tackle them as we can. Sometimes we can. Sometimes they take us in different tangents. Granted, there's been plenty of times we take ourselves in different tangents. So let's go ahead and move into the news headlines of the week. The first one I just want to hit on relatively quickly because it dominated our news stories in 2022, 2023, around enough to keep going. And that was the Activision Blizzard, the Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. And so this week it was finalized, it wasn't finalized, that it was announced that the FTC, the United States Federal Trade Commission, has dropped a complaint against Microsoft's acquisition. This is a news story I picked up multiple places. I picked it up here from Sophie McAvoy out in gamesindustry.biz that the commission has determined to drop its case against Microsoft in the Activision Blizzard King acquisition. And so because of that, which was first kind of finalized back in 2022, that deal is officially done and gone through, that there are no other court challenges going on. And so this is why we're kind of quick follow-up. Not a whole lot to talk about because we've talked about it a whole lot at this point, but it felt appropriate given all the airplay that we gave it over the number of years to kind of just follow up and mention that as well. Game Logic, any thoughts here on the FTC?
No, not in particular. I mean, there was a lot of hoopla about it's finally over and concerns about wasting time and things of that nature. And I mean, I think you have to be deliberately obtuse about the way politics work, and I think a more nuanced view of everything that went on is that while there was absolutely a legal case in an effort to block it, this a lot of policy and influence that went on during that regime of the FTC wasn't about winning cases, right? But was about telegraphing to big business, and in particularly like the big tech five, that they were not just going to saunter an M&A through kind of and get a kind of Reagan era hand wave to proceed, right? That they were going to have to show a great deal of due diligence, that their cases were going to be challenged, that there was an effort to reestablish a new environment and a new atmosphere for what the expectations of M&A activity was going to be. So, and you can agree or disagree with that, based on typically what I see based on your political affiliation, right? But but for me, antitrust, anti-competition is a thing, right? That I've always been very opinionated about. So, for some, what went on will be okay, and for some, it won't.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point in terms of this non-story story of this was an ongoing action by the FTC under the previous administration of really kind of challenging things in some way, for the sake of challenging it, to provide that due diligence and that transparency. So, all right, let's go on and move into our next news story. Game Logic, you've got something around Intel and some more GPUs.
Yeah, I do. This new story over on WCCF Tech by Sarfraz Khan. Intel mentions ARC B750 on official website. Is Intel planning to release another mid-range battle mage GPU? Now, this story broke just at the beginning of Computex, which is going on this week. The user Hayes2K1 just spotted an Intel ARC B750 being mentioned on Intel's official website, and the GPU is still live. And the GPU name is still live. Page is currently active. Again, this was earlier in the week. The page is currently active on the Intel Japan website, which might indicate that Intel is likely preparing a new Battlemage GPU. There have been rumors regarding more powerful Battlemage GPUs in the Intel Arc B580, but these were mostly related to the Arc B770. So as of right now, as far as I can tell, from what I've been tracking on Computex, the B750 has not been actually announced at Computex. But these indications are still that it's in the works. I put this in just as kind of more of a way to kind of generally sum up like what's going on in the GPU space, right? You have NVIDIA, who just released the 5000 series cards, right? At the end of last year, just released the RTX 5060s. There are two SKUs of that, one of which is making reviewers, tech tubers, in particularly grumpy, because I believe they're both labeled 5060 Ti. One is 8 gigabytes and one is 16 gigabytes. And so, in addition, on the base 8 gigabyte one, you're going to run into these problems that I talked about before with VRAM. But on top of that, it's also got a very small bus. I think it only has a 128-bit bus. I might be wrong. It might have a 192, but it has a strangle bus. It is using GDDR7, and so it has slightly more bandwidth than you would have expected from previous generations. But the point is that it's a card which is going to be hugely popular because it's the cheapest card. It's going to go into a ton of pre-built systems, and it is hampered by a relatively small bus width and 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Fewer compute units, fewer CUDA cores, yada, yada, yada. But of course, the market has already responded and the thing is already selling out like hotcakes. And so you have that lay of the land. Now, AMD, very interestingly, just dropped its 9060 XT, and it has both an 8 gigabyte and a 16 gigabyte SKU as well. But the 16 gigabyte SKU, I can't remember the pricing right off the top of my head, but the 16 gigabyte SKU undercuts the NVIDIA offering. And I want to say the 16 gigabyte SKU, I think, is fairly close in price to the 8 gigabyte SKU from NVIDIA. So, now the problem with the tail of the tape with AMD is that they did all of this stuff last time with putting out the 9070 XT and the 9070, which are incredibly efficient GPUs. I don't think they have as much raw compute as their NVIDIA counterparts. But as per the norm, AMD kind of gives VRAM away. But of course, the big marketing trumpet around those GPUs was a very low MSRP, which has turned out to not really mean anything because all of these things they're incredibly scarce still. And all of these things are going for much higher than regular MSRP. On Amazon, a 97 XT is going for close to $1,000 and pretty much the same exact price as an RTX 5070 Ti. when this was supposed to be a GPU that was going to vastly undercut NVIDIA's pricing on the 5070 Ti. So what's curious now is now you have Intel, which is in the background, whose cards have really come on to be vastly more performant than they were when they originally launched. And their problem with they originally launched is that they didn't provide a lot of legacy support for older games, and they have been since improving on those. And so people still have their fingers crossed that Intel is going to continue to put out Arc Battle Mage GPUs that will undercut prices and be very performant without necessarily attacking NVIDIA, right? As far as like at the high performance end of the scale, but come out vastly more inexpensive. The problem with Intel is obviously all the things going on at Intel, and the fact that these GPUs they've been really silent, right, on the front of the launch of these GPUs. I think one of them has maybe launched, but they're just not in really particularly abundant supply. So, fortunately, despite them not being in abundant supply, I don't see the prices getting cranked up as much. But that's just kind of where we are in this muddle, right, going into the summer. That hopefully there will be some type of tiebreaker that will unlock everything. But that kind of remains to be seen.
So let's segue that into your next news story around the MSI's Claw, but again dealing with AMD in terms of chips sets and things like that. And I think this market has become more and more competitive in terms of the handheld PC market. We had Steam open up Steam OS in their most recent update to provide functionality on third-party systems. We've got Xbox coming with a kind of partnership with Lenovo. So what sets a Claw 8 apart?
So the main thing that sets the Claw apart is the first Claw, which I think was I can't remember all these designations. Had an Arrow Lake S chip in it, so it had the new Core Ultra chip in it. I think maybe a 265S. But their newest variant, which is now I guess their highest performance variant, has AMD Ryzen Z2 Extreme chip in it. And I want to say this chip is, I guess, like I said, it's very difficult to keep up with this stuff. I can't remember if this is the same chip in the ROG Ally, the highest ROG Ally SKU. But the main thing to take away from this is that the handheld space is proving to kind of be the most interesting to watch right now from a hardware perspective. And it has the potential to get easier. I was so hoping that at Comp2X we would hear announcements from NVIDIA and Qualcomm that they were getting into the handheld gaming PC space. I think NVIDIA is a little further delayed. I believe their APUs that they would use in handhelds and laptops are a little further behind, and now it seems like more so than producing their own CPU, they are partnering with MediaTek, who if you're an Android user and you're an Android user who has spent time skittering off the main beaten path into different handsets, MediaTek is a company that historically has provided CPUs or mobile chipsets for kind of like your cheap lower end tablets. And then a couple of years ago, they really started moving to the higher end. And now they've shown up in, I want to say, a few high end laptops and higher end cell phones. But in particular, now they're making this move now in a partnership with NVIDIA. Now that partnership is expected not to yield new chipsets really for another 1 to 2 years, maybe. But the space continues to be interesting as you get now to Windows on ARM, and you get a lot more possibilities. So like I said, this is AMD showing up with a chipset for an iteration of the Claw, which I think, like I said, originally launched with so the Intel equipped Claw 8 AI Plus, which released late last year, was what the Claw came out with originally, backed by an Intel chipset, and that at the time was super interesting because there wasn't an Intel chipset in a handheld PC at the time. And now they're back using an AMD. So I while this is interesting, it's also a thing for people to be cautious about if you're hunting one of these things, because you get in kind of the ROG Ally situation where you have like 8 different SKUs out, right, with very small nitinoids potentially of performance difference between the two. But sometimes what could be like a significantly different cost, right? And so you really want to make sure you understand what's in the handheld versus how much that particular SKU costs, particularly if you're hunting for like a used one, right, or maybe as a previous SKU that's no longer really in production.
I think it's a really good point, right? Because you had mentioned the ROG Ally X, that had Ryzen Z1 in it, where this has a Ryzen Z2. But again, the difference there is ROG Ally X is $800 new. This is $999, $1,000 new. If you're looking aftermarket aspects, there are a number of iterations and similar names, but different processor sets and graphic card sets in each of them, or being aware of what not only the storage, but the RAM and all the other pieces. It's just like buying a PC, that it's not simply just grabbing a name and finding a unit, but also looking at the specs of that unit. So that's a good point to be made there, Game Logic. Thank you. So let's go from confusing specs to surprising simplicity, that in a week from now, as the Nintendo Switch 2 launches, I can just hook up my mouse to it. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, you brought up a good point. Like, it's funny because today I mentioned on social media that, because I've been so heads down playing games, I had completely forgotten that Summer Games Fest kicks off week after next, and the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2 is yet again another thing that I completely forgot. I was like, oh wow, it is June. It is June next week. So yeah, this was one of the things that I had suspected for a while and was hoping to hear about, because it could make a difference in my own thoughts of whether or not I'll be purchasing one. Still currently out of the pool. In particular, my recent purchase of a new GPU is making me very disinterested in picking up a Switch 2. But we'll cover this news story. This over on GameSpot by Blair Marnell. Nintendo Switch 2 is compatible with a standard USB mouse. As seen during a demo for Nobunaga's Ambition Awakening CE, it's possible to use a regular mouse with Switch 2. One of the most intriguing developments with Switch 2 is that the Joy-Con 2 controllers have mouse-like functionality for certain games. It's been a long requested feature, but players who love using mice appear to have that option on Switch 2 as well. During a demonstration for Nobunaga's Ambition Awakening CE on Switch 2 via Insider Gaming, producer Michi Ryu plugged a wired mouse into the console and began playing with it. He also noted that when the mouse is plugged in, it takes priority control away from the Joy-Con 2 controllers. Ryu used the mouse around the 10:53 mark in the video below. Now, what I suspect is in similar fashion to the camera, because one thing that has not been spoken about very loudly is you can use other third-party USB cameras, USB-C cameras, with the Nintendo Switch 2. And so now with the cameras, it's a limited set, right? That are usable. I wonder, and I suspect, so in Mac OS, there are certain cameras that have a certain, I can't remember what it is, but a certain set of of driver extensions and APIs that allow the camera to be addressed by Mac OS. I'm using one tonight. But other USB cameras don't have those driver sets. So for instance, I'm using an Elgato camera tonight. It has the driver extension. But Razer cameras do not. And so I wonder if it is a similar situation with cameras that implement like some certain package or extension of drivers and or APIs associated with some spec that Nintendo supports, and that's why you have some cameras that will work and some that won't. I suspect it is the same thing with the mice. I don't know that like every single mouse is going to work with it. I wouldn't run out and buy like a high-end gaming PC mouse for fear that it might not work. I would definitely probably stay away from trying to use a Razer mouse for fear that will be one that'll be a one-off that in particular won't work. But if you have extra gaming mice, sitting around, it might be worth trying to hook them up. Like I said, because of the mouse functionality that I've seen since the demo, it always made sense to me that this would be something that would be supported. So you look at the third party situation and the types of games that are coming over, and I think you're already starting to see a greater volume and discussion around bringing 4X type games over, bringing RTS type of games over, but other games that support mice. But in particular, what I'm also super interested about is, first person shooters that are going to come over. And so, this, again, we live in a different economies of scale now. And so one thing that frames my mind is, again, the prices of GPUs now. While one part of me says that makes me not interested in going out and spending another $450 on a Nintendo Switch 2, by the same token, it makes me think maybe I'll just go get a Nintendo Switch 2 and play some PC ports of games as a low cost solution alternative to to my high end PCs. And one thing I do like to do, I do like to have equipment around to minimize wear and tear right over my gear. And so it could sell at a higher resale value later. But this type of thing makes that notion, super interesting. Not enough to tip me over the edge, but it is something interesting to take note of. I don't know, DBQ, any thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I think it's hard to feel super excited about standard mouse functionality within the Switch 2 until we see more of what that actually, like, what else is there, right? Outside of Metroid 4, outside of Civ. But again, if you've got a PC, you have the option of playing Civ with a mouse on a PC. And so I think it does create some options. It creates some more flexibility. I think it might be a nice way to play Metroid 4, but it also means, like, what does my setup look like in terms of where am I hooking up my dock to be able to pop a USB mouse into? So yeah, as Priscilla T said in the chat, who doesn't have a whole lot of mice sitting around that can be repurposed for something, which is great. I'm glad that that's a functionality. And as you said, Game Logic, like it is just reasonable that those are the type of drivers that they're going to be including in, so that it's not some proprietary aspect, and it allows a lot more flexibility and possibility, just like with the camera, where you can use third-party cameras as well. I don't think this pushes anybody over the mark, though, in terms of picking up a Switch 2.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned the thing about but if I already have a PC that I'm already covered, and it's funny because for a very long time I've always, it's one of the reasons I was enrolled in Stadia when it first came out, is yes, I have a PC, yes, I have more than one, right? I have more than one way of getting at like a high end PC gaming experience. But however, there are nights, as I've always mentioned, right? Why do I have a laptop? Why do I have Macs? Well, because some nights I want to come in and do stuff, and I don't want to have to light off a beast of 12 fans, as I often refer to them, and create this big RGB light show sucking hundreds to 1,000 watts of power, to do certain things, right? And so if there's a low power method to get at a thing, sometimes that is also an interesting alternative to have. So we'll see. Definitely makes things interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And Nate also talks about it in the chat in terms of bringing up and making it easier for other RTSs. So I'm going to take a deep breath here, because this is a game that I liked the pedigree of in terms of former StarCraft developers. But in terms of other RTSs and the struggles that they're having, Game Logic, you've got a sad announcement here about the end of one development.
Well, this is an interesting thing also to see happen again, as we're now like one calendar week away from being in the week of Summer Games Fest, because this is of course where this game first showed up. It showed up on Keighley stage last summer, and it heralded as its go-to reason to be interested in it that it was going to provide online PvP competitive play that was analogous to kind of the speed of Stargate, the speed of
Richard Dean Anderson is perfectly thankful that you're referencing Stargate, so it's perfectly fine. No, of StarCraft, right? We've got this game, and we also have Stormgate, which is another RTS game developed by former StarCraft designers as well. But this is Uncapped Games. This is Roger Kim. Is that right?
Richard Kim, I thought it was.
Richard Kim. There we go. Thank you. Yes.
So, I mean, the big premise behind this was that you were going to be able to queue up and play this game, and one of the things that's a turnoff to RTS, I go back to some of the LAN battles that I used to have, and they were fun, but like if you were playing, and we played RTSs in rotation, right? So we played Age of Empires and Galactic Battlegrounds, and and my favorite, that was Empire Earth, and I used to try and get everybody to play Empire Earth because I thought that
Battlegrounds, nice call. Yeah.
No, not well. I mean, not a nice call. I hate Age
enough,
of Empires. Right? So
Galactic Battlegrounds is Chris Taylor, though, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
Okay, but anyhow, we're going back to the RTS days, early 2000s, when they ruled the PC. Yes.
So the problem with those battles, right, is when they go on forever, right? When it's and you're playing in like a 4 or 6 player thing, and when you get knocked out, then you're kind of standing around waiting for like everybody else. And sometimes it devolves into kind of a chess game kind of stalemate, right, type of thing. And so this game was going to wire you into matches that supposedly weren't going to last for more than like 10 minutes, supposedly. So it was going to kind of package an RTS kind of in a Call of Duty framework of things that don't last too long. So this news story over on PC Games N by Jamie Horay. It's always heartbreaking to see a promising new multiplayer game scrapped, but it's even sadder still to see one wrap up development before it even fully launches. Unfortunately, that's exactly what's happened to Battle Aces, an RTS game aiming to deliver super fast 1v1 and 2v2 matches while still boasting plenty of strategic depth, despite its premise and the fact that it has a former StarCraft dev as a game director. Battle Aces has reached the end of its journey. And so, I'm sorry, David Kim was the guy behind it, Blizzard veteran, senior game designer on StarCraft 2 for roughly a decade. So yeah, I mean, my assumption is that he had venture capital backing. So, it's a sad state of the environment. And I think more and more so, kind of in PlayStation kind of fashion, we're going to see, projects where people are not willing to stomach the go-to-market post-launch O&M drain, financial drain that happens, and the effort that a lot of these games spend, of a year or more trying to claw and fight and hang on to the cliffside by a pinky, when the fact is that mathematically you can see that unfortunately maybe they don't really stand much of a chance in the market as it is. So unfortunately, I think we're going to see more and more of that type of behavior. And then we'll just have to see, what impact that has to, projects getting off the ground, and not just. And I think it's not even an RTS thing in this case. It is a online multiplayer game as a service, right, type of thing that people are finally realizing, kind of like, I excoriated, the PC game show, I can't remember, like maybe 7 years ago, right in the wake of Fortnite, that like every development team that came up was launching a battle royale, and I'm like, guys, like the market is only going to support so many. So yeah, we'll see how things go from here.
Yeah, I think that is the challenge of launching, a free-to-play game at this point, in terms of finding enough player base to sustain it. So yeah, it is too bad. I liked the art style of it. I like the idea of it. I've heard people talk about Battle Aces and really enjoy it. I believe Brad Shoemaker over on Nextlander, former Giant Bomb, really huge StarCraft person, but has really enjoyed Battle Aces and as well. So, and just for clarification's sake, Galactic Battlegrounds was the Star Wars skin of Age of Empires, and I was thinking of Supreme Commander is what I was thinking of in terms of Chris Taylor. Yep.
And I thought you, not the Chris Taylor reference, but I thought, because typically what people confuse that game with is Empire at War, which was a full-blown from the ground up standalone RTS, design for the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, which was actually an RTS versus just a mod, basically, of
Right.
Yep. Right. Fair enough. All right. Well, I want to hit one more news story before we head into our final playthrough of the week. But again, this one is just a quick follow-up. We started the news with a follow-up, and we're going to end it with a follow-up. And this is after 5 years and multiple lawsuits and court rulings and everything else. Fortnite is back on the Apple App Store that we had a couple weeks ago, almost a month ago at this point, probably right before I was off the show. We had a ruling in court that Apple was found in contempt of court in terms of some of the testimony that it gave, and that it was ordered to put Fortnite back on the store. And then you had this back and forth of Epic messaging out that they had submitted it and they're waiting and kind of had this kind of stall tactic from Apple. And now this week they are back on the Apple App Store. And really, I think the big news here is what happened a month ago of the finding the contempt of court and the ruling in terms of really opening up the Apple Store to third-party purchases. And not having, being able to, the whole reason that Fortnite came off of the App Store 5 years ago was the kind of 30% take that Apple was taking on at purchases in game. And so the ruling here really is about kind of opening up that market, that they are not taking their cut off of things, off of purchases in game to the same degree. And so I think that's a significant piece. We certainly talked about all the revelations that came of this over the, during all the testimony in terms of how much Epic was spending on free games on Epic Launcher. And so Hero Down Under can't see Fortnite on the Mac Store yet in Australia. So I wonder if this is simply just a US ruling in terms of getting it back on the App Store within the US market, because it was a US court decision. So thank you for that clarification, Hero Down Under. Much appreciated. And also appreciate our wide-ranging audience spanning the globe. So any thoughts here, Game Logic?
A few. One point of clarification. I don't don't think Fortnite is on the Mac, unless you play it via Xbox Cloud Gaming. So I think, as far as I know, Fortnite is just available on iOS.
On iOS, yes. Yep. The difference, did I say them? Well,
Hero said the Mac store.
Hero said the Mac store, yes.
I'm not sure if he meant the iOS store or not. One thing that's super curious about this to me that just kind of occurred as we were going over the story. So, because a week or two ago, when this story was kind of breaking, and it broke once and then again, because I think there was the ruling, and then Epic submitted to put it on the store, and Apple rejected it, and so I think this is the ruling for, hey guys, knock it off. Like I said, let it back on the store. But in that time, we have also gotten the word that Xbox is shutting down COD Warzone Mobile. And so when I go back...
Yeah, you all talked about that last week, right? Yep.
I think so, yeah. And so when I go back, thinking about 8 years ago when Fortnite really broke out big, and then 7 years ago when, like, in conjunction with that, Fortnite Mobile was a thing, I thought that the story was a bigger deal. But now I think about it today, and I'm like, okay, so we've had a game, which, because COD Mobile, which was the thing I kind of excoriated pundits and influencers for last week about getting it wrong and not, great Scott, not understanding that COD Mobile and Warzone Mobile are two completely different games. We've now had one of arguably the largest IP, right, in gaming, failed to successfully launch as a battle royale on mobile. COD does not have a battle royale. COD Mobile does not have a battle royale mode. It's all arena based, right, multiplayer. Is this as big a deal in 2025? Like, is this going to go anywhere? Is Fortnite that unstoppable that it's ubiquitous across all platforms? Or I would argue, and I've been pushing back on this whole notion that Gen Alpha will only want to play on like tablets and phones, and console game, hug your console. I'm like you guys are way overly, like, as people grow up, they want nicer things, and so I listened to music on a Walkman as a kid, and when I grew up, I bought components, right? Like you buy nicer things when you have money. Has this window passed?
I don't know. I don't know that it's passed, right? I don't know that it's the same kind of hype train that it would have been 5 years ago. But at the same time, I think about, hearing from my kids' younger siblings and friends who have younger kids, and the idea of mobile devices still being a place that is an introductory space that then becomes, then they do graduate onto PCs and consoles and other things. But that idea that it's an introductory space, and it potentially is a space where it's an onboarding space to some degree, right? Like if your older sibling is playing on a PC or on a console, and you as a younger kid want to do something, I could see where it is valuable for the longevity of Fortnite to have this avenue. But no, I don't think that it suddenly is like this huge amount of revenue generating for Epic. It is probably more about kind of the mind share of the game space more than it is about the amount of revenue that being on the App Store is going to get them. And Hero, thanks for the clarification that it's not on the App Store either. So yes, it must be a regional issue, which makes sense based on the court ruling. So we'll see if this kind of stretches out geographically across the globe and into different regions, or if this is something, the UK and the EU have ruled separately on this as well. So, all right, Game Logic, we ready to move into our final section? we will take us out here with our last 15 minutes of the show. So one of the news stories that I didn't talk about was a big Games Workshop Warhammer event that happened this week, which meant that they provided some updates and a variety of things. And I played a little bit of two of their games that dropped this week, or one game that dropped suddenly and another one that came into 1.0 out of early access release. So the game that came out of early access release was Warhammer 40K Speed Freaks, which was previously in it was in early access. It was a free-to-play, designed as a free-to-play game with a whole bunch of microtransactions, and now all the microtransactions and free-to-play aspects have been stripped out. It is simply just a $15 game, and it is a car. It's a car battler. It is, Twisted Metal. It's a variety of other things. It's made by the Grid developers. In terms of trying to remember the studio there, but Grid Car Battler. And yes, yeah, thank you, Hero Dunner. One of the big news stories that came out was the Space Marine remaster, which is launching on PC and Xbox, but is not coming out day one on PlayStation 5. Appreciate that catch there. Yes, that is one of the big ones that was announced. One of the other things that was announced was some additional information about Warhammer 40K Boltgun 2. So Boltgun was kind of the boomer shooter aspect in this, late 90s, as we're talking about Doom at the top of the show. Boltgun came out a few years ago as kind of boomer shooter callback in that same kind of 90s graphical style, and they put out a quick little free game, Boltgun Words of Vengeance, and it really is a promo for Boltgun 2. This is Typing of the Dead. Last week, Tao talked about another typing game. This is, you are moving through, or it moves you automatically scroll through the Warhammer Boltgun level, and it pops up with different words to spell, phrases to use. Sometimes you have kind of the equivalent of QuickTime events of hitting a certain letter as an enemy is coming towards you. But, sometimes they are actual phrases, and sometimes they are very much Warhammer phrases in terms of things you're spelling. So if you make one mistake, it kind of rumbles a little bit, or the screen shimmies a little bit, and if you make 3 mistakes, it'll set back. You can actually have it, depending on the difficulty, it'll the number of mistakes that it'll reset the word or the phrase that you're supposed to be typing. And there's 3 different worlds in total. They take about 20 minutes to kind of play through. You can play through on harder difficulties, which really just gives you less of a window in terms of error to make, or a shorter time period to be able to type that in. So depending on how fast your typing skills are, but to tell you what this is, the final phrase you type to beat the boss of the third level, that in the third and last level, the phrase you type is Wishlist Boltgun 2, right? So it is very much, it is done to promote the next game, but it's kind of a fun little distraction. It was, I always enjoyed the typing games. There was a number of them back in the day. And so it was kind of fun to play that, and I enjoyed Boltgun. I played it on Xbox when it came to Game Pass. So yeah, a couple of kind of fun Warhammer games coming out, along with a drop of a remaster of Space Marine, which was originally on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 and PC. Game Logic, we talked about Doom Eternal quite a bit. Do you have any more to talk about that, or do you want to talk about some Final Fantasy?
One thing I want to mention is I made a quick no notice banner that I've been scrolling for the last few minutes, and there is as part of all the Warhammer hoopla that's been going on, there is a Warhammer Steam sale that's going on right now. I struggle whenever there's a sale on Steam to know when it is going to end. like it's always buried in small print somewhere. And so I've learned that typing that question into chat GPT will find it. And so the sale is actually going until Thursday. And you can check what time. A lot of times that means it goes till that day, like at noon on Eastern time. So you can definitely check those games out there.
And part of that sale is a Warhammer 40K Gladius, Relics of War, which is a RTS. As we're speaking about RTSs, it is 100% off. It's a free, you can add it to your, is that Gladius? No, you're pulling up Doom. Okay.
Yes, yeah, I'll just let this play in the background.
Okay. Yep, just talking about, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about Doom some more.
So, well, I have one other Warhammer thing to mention. The other thing that got mentioned is, I want to say, I don't have the story at my fingertips. I want to say there was also word that Warhammer, or at least somebody mentioned, I think Warhammer 40K Dawn of War is being remade also. And that is the RTS that really, in my mind, kicked off the whole resurgence of like the Warhammer IP as a PC game. It looks like DBQ's fact checking that, so I can't remember if it was an announcement that it was being remade, or that there was just active discussion that it was going to be remade. I believe that is Relic Entertainment who does that game, one of my top 5 favorite studios. So
I thought I did see something about Relic. Yeah,
I thought so too.
Yeah.
So maybe when DBQ comes back on the mic to talk about his other game, I'll go over that, or maybe when you do the new releases coming out next week. Yeah, I don't have a ton to add to the discussion of Doom Eternal. Like I said, you know, there's lots of lore pieces buried in there. Here it's playing a voice log. Apparently, it's interesting now that the Dark Ages is out, because you can see kind of the beginning of, I guess, the Doomslayer lore, and then 2016 is seems like a time jump, like into a further point in the future, and then Doom Eternal follows that. But you know, here the vlog is talking about this one point where apparently humans got a hold of the Slayer and were like able to run tests on him, and so again, it's just kind of interesting that the universe is more expensive. And I'm sure that there's been books written and other things that I've written, and there are lots of people out there who are probably like super deep into Doom lore. But yeah, I mean, I've had fun. Like I said, we talked a lot about. I've had fun with Doom Eternal. Of course, the crazy platforming is probably the most insane thing. How you sometimes have to leave walls with having no knowledge of where it is you're supposed to wind up, because where you're supposed to wind up is somewhere around a blind corner. I mean, you literally have to turn a 90-degree turn in midair. But yeah, I will say the thing that I will say is more interesting in Doom Eternal is like the weapon upgrade system. I do find that seems to be more interesting than Doom, the Dark Ages, but that may just be, you know, a 1 week recency bias thing, where because I've been playing Doom Eternal more as of late, once I get back to Doom the Dark Ages, I'll probably kind of get a greater grasp on whether or not that is actually the case or not. For Final Fantasy, it's kind of interesting, having recently completed Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Of course, you know, you might rekindle a yen for JRPGs. I went on my big JRPG journey through a portion of last year, before I got rid of my consoles, where I had a lot of those JRPGs, and I have not replaced all of them on PC yet. But playing Clair Obscur did, because it rekindled 2 retro thoughts, or retro, or bucket list, kind of two bucket lists, I guess. And one of those is for JRPGs. Another one of those is to go back and try some more Souls-like games again. But in the JRPG space, I have played Final Fantasy VII remake. I can't remember. I think it was it may have been in PS Plus at one point. maybe just before or after Rebirth came out.
Yeah, there was. If you had PS Plus, the remake, the first Final Fantasy VII was in PS Plus before Rebirth. Yeah, actually, quite a few years before Rebirth. So yes.
So yeah, so I think that's where I played it initially. I went ahead and decided to plunk down for Remake Intergrade on PC. It's very funny because the whole time that name was around, I was like, "What is Remake Intergrade?" And I think I got Remake Intergrade confused with I can't. There's another Inter something that is like this piece that follows a character called I can't remember if her name is Yumi or Yuri or something like that.
That is Intergrade. That includes the kind of the DLC from Remake, which does, I think it's Yumi. No, it's not. But yes, it is. This is, if Swiss was here, he would correct us for our lack of Final Fantasy VII knowledge. But Hero Down Under, Crisis Core, yeah, Crisis Core is. I really appreciated Crisis Core as a game back on the PSP in the day as well, and the remake, the remaster remake that was done on consoles and PCs is really solid.
So Intergrade refers to that specific content, but the actual SKU name for that release is Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, and that is the PC version and the PS5 version. So that's what I picked up. I had to swim through a little bit of like, what the heck is it that I'm buying exactly? But I have started it again, in very much kind of how Mass Effect for some people, Mass Effect bogs down in the Citadel. And there's this whole like run and fetch and side mission palooza before you finally get out of there. It is very similar to that, like, and that's the airspace I'm in now, which is where I bounced off of it before, which is when after you take out the Mako 1 reactor and you go to the slums. It is just a trying to think of a polite term. It's a ton of side missions.
Yeah, it's a lot of side missions, and so is Rebirth. There's a lot of side missions. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, until it's not like, and the difference between this and an open world, like in an open world game, you can mainline the campaign and you have the option to bypass it. Like this, like literally continuing on the mainline campaign is not available right until some point, right when I hit some trigger. So before, and there's some side missions that like there's a cat side mission, right? That like there's no determinicity to it at all. Like you're looking for cats. It's not like they're on the radar. It's not like you know where they are. Like you'll randomly pass by some space and a cat will be meowing and Tifa will say something and then you're in the vicinity of a cat. I'm like, dude, like, but there's literally no way that I know of, without reading a guide, to like deliberately go through that mission step by step by step. It is totally at random. And so it took me a while, like as I was because I like selected that mission, tracked it, went to it, started executing it, and I'm like, how the heck do you get to the next? And it took me a while to figure out I just need to leave that mission in run and then go do another mission and then just assume that eventually like I'll cross paths right with these things, like and that's what happened. Like just by happenstance, I was doing other stuff and then I completed the cat mission. I'm like, this is JRPGs, right? I was like, it takes a special type of human being to like grok this, And I'm like, and then it solidifies. So I'm like, that's why I've always put the Final Fantasy people off in a corner over there, right? It's like people that I don't understand. So, but I'm having fun with it. It is, I'm on PC, right? I'm running it on some of my newer GPUs. I'm definitely seeing, how some people feel. It definitely has a visual style to it that is stunning, right? In some ways. And the combat, it's weird, right? It's and again, I'm not steeped in Final Fantasy lore. It's funny that I come off this turn-based JRPG kind of I don't want to say incentivized, but influenced type of game. And that is That is not what this is, and it's not even. I can't remember what was the Final Fantasy title that I tried. It was maybe Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X, that combat is, I want to, if I've got the number right, is more closer to like the Expedition 33 type of thing. It is an actual turn-based. Do I have the number wrong?
Well, 10 is very turn-based. Yeah, I think that, I mean, it is very static in that classic turn-based. There's no, kind of 15 and 16 are much more action-y based. And somehow 7 Remake and Rebirth kind of land in between there, where it feels more actiony, but it's not nearly as actiony as 15 and 16.
Yeah, I feel like it's way more actiony than Expedition 33, though, right? It hews much closer to that. Whereas, like I said, the other one that I tried before, I think I played that one on Game Pass and kind of just toe dipped into it, was much more so like, here's a turn, like your characters are sequenced by initiative or whatever, but like there are these things you can do, or things that happen that cause a character to be able to take an action, right? Like in the course of the turn. So that was a little bit more kind of, I guess, what I was expecting way back when I first tried 7, but 7 is like just full on action, right? It's, then in the course of executing your attacks, then you can hit like a bullet time, instance, right, to select some more advanced, throw in your spells and special attacks and things like that. So it is interesting, right? I'm having fun with it. Because I've swallowed my general feeling of towards JRPGs as a genre, that they are just rife with friction. And that is the thing that I dislike most as a gamer, right? That fun inefficiency. I'm able to enjoy it a little bit more. Still kind of weirded out by like the faux romance kind of stuff, but and wanting to get more to kind of more of the actiony and character progression and things like that. But yeah, just as far as just taking a bite out of a more kind of classic historical, that type of gaming title that people say, well, as a gamer, this should be a thing that you've played. I'm having fun with it. And like I said, it performs amazingly on PC and really renders those visuals in pretty in an amazing state.
Yeah, I can believe that. I mean, it looked amazing on, back in the PlayStation era. It looks great on PlayStation 5. I'm sure it looks beautiful on PC. So, and just a clarification, it is Warhammer 40K Dawn of War Definitive Edition, which is the announcement happened at the same time as all these other Warhammer announcements.
So I'm going to fact check your fact check. I want to say when I went to look this up, I think there's already a definitive edition that launched like a few years ago, and like this is like another thing, because I think there's a definitive edition that incorporates all of the DLC, and like some graphical upgrades, and then this is yet like another thing that I want to say is called something. Because when I went looking for this thing, the first thing that I found was the definitive edition, and I'm like, oh, wait a second, that's not the same thing.
There's an anniversary edition, which includes all the. Yep, and I saw that as well. I'm like, well, this can't be right. Yes, there's an anniversary edition, and then there is this definitive edition is what was announced according to looking at the Reddit Warhammer 40K and subreddit here. This was announced in those same trailers. So yes, the difference is the anniversary edition versus the definitive edition, which in true remaster and re-release fashion, nothing is ever clear and easy to understand.
And the anniversary edition has no release date, correct?
The newest, the definitive edition, has no release date. The anniversary edition is out and released.
Okay, gotcha. And the anniversary edition, then the anniversary edition released like years ago, right? The new thing that just got announced, the definitive edition.
Yeah.
We don't know that's coming.
This is the one that's going to kind of modernize some graphics, do some other, it sounds like some 64-bit modding is going to be included in it and other pieces here. Yep.
Yeah, I want to say in similar fashion to the Oblivion remaster, it is also supposedly going to support all of the old mods from out of the gate.
I think so. I haven't looked at all of it yet, but yeah, I think so. All right, so just gonna wrap up here at the end. One of the other games that I've been playing on and off over the course of the past month, and I'll probably spend some more time on it just as we have some not pressed for time, is a game that came out in early access on Game Pass. It's on PC as well. It's from Stoic Studios. So Stoic is the developer of Banner Saga and the Banner Saga trilogy. And this game is Towerborne. And Towerborne is, I'm having a ton of fun with it. I just keep coming back to it because it is simply, it's a beat 'em up. It's a belt scroller. But it is this kind of MMO beat 'em up to some degree. Like you can join public games, you can open up yours to bring other people in, up to 4 people in a, you kind of spawn into instance levels, and it's a side scrolling beat 'em up with some great combos. It feels really fluid. You've got 4 different classes. You have like a sword and shield, you have a kind of rogue thief class with 2 daggers, which are quick attacks. You've got somebody that has like big Hulk-like gauntlets, like stone gauntlets that do a lot of like punching combos and significant damage. And then you have like almost like a fire cannon class as well. And so you can switch between all those classes. It is very much, it is like, it's a side scroller beat 'em up with a little bit of a loot game in it. And I think, you get loot drops that have your traditional kind of gray, green, blue, purple, kind of rarities to them. They give you different stats. You can put combos of gear together to build sets, which give you even additional stats, whether it's bleed damage on an enemy or poison damage or health regen, similar to any other loot game that you've played. It's kind of feels like it's combining Diablo's loot game with the classic 90s arcade belt scroller. And in some ways I'm loving it, that it feels repetitive in some ways and grindy because I'm going back to a lot of the same stages. But by this, by the second day, by the third day of playing it, going back to similar stages, they're a little different, but the backgrounds are not drastically different. The point of view that I have to keep in mind is, if I think about all the quarters I plugged into games back in the day, how many times did you play through the first level? How many times did you play through the second level, right? Like we're playing these same things, playing these same levels, and the loot aspect of it gives a little different tweak. And so it's available if you have Game Pass on Xbox or on PC. It's in early access. I think it's $25 or $30 to kind of buy into the early access. But Towerborne, I'm going to keep kind of chipping, kind of coming back to it here and there as they release updates, because I'm a sucker for a good belt scroller kind of side, beat 'em up. And the idea of doing that with some kind of continual progression or persistence in it is enjoyable. So that's Towerborne from Stoic.
So DBQ, I don't want to dive too deep into this because this is a smaller title, a smaller release. If this was something bigger on the landscape, I would want to pull the thread on it more. But and so maybe admittedly it's on me for not following this as closely. But I mean, Towerborne, we heard about Towerborne for years. It got a lot of voice tracking.
Yeah, it definitely. Yeah, it's an Xbox Studio kind of published piece. Yeah,
but the way you describe the game, it never came across to me that that's what the style of game this was. Was this? So that wasn't just me. That was just.
It's kind of a surprise to me as well. That maybe at one point it looked like something that was a little more 3D rather than a 2D side scroller. It felt at one point, I remember it kind of being pitched as this kind of co-op PvE, but I never envisioned it as a belt scroller. So,
and this is a game that the last kind of S curve with this thing was that it went into early access on Steam, if I'm not mistaken. And so is this the full commercial retail release on Xbox?
No, so it's still in early access. It went early access on PC, and this is at the beginning of May. It went early access or game preview on Xbox. And I think it's iteration. Well, so one of the things in the updates that this current iteration, there are no longer any resets. They're not going to be doing any other account resets. So we're progressing closer to a 1.0. But it is, it still feels, and I think this is where I'm going to keep checking back in it. Like, I enjoy the gameplay, but the onboarding and kind of the understanding of what you're supposed to do next. If I wasn't out digging on, Reddit threads to kind of figure out some of those things, I think I would have missed some things. Because it's definitely an early access game in terms of not having kind of this smooth onboarding ramp, but the gameplay loop is certainly solid.
And is it on Xbox, or are you playing it? Is it on Xbox, or is it in PC Game Pass?
It is in both. So I could play it on PC Game Pass. I could play it on Xbox Game Pass. It's also on Xbox. So if you have Game Pass, it's available for you. If you want to get into the preview, it's basically buying into early access like you would on PC. So it's the $25 or so to buy into early access.
Okay.
Yep. All right, let's head off and close out this week. We've got some games coming up next week. We finally have Elden Ring Night Rain coming out on the 29th of May. You've got a note here that Lost Soul Aside was supposed to come out at the end of May, but it's delayed until the 29th of August.
Yeah, I included it in the rundown because I don't know that. I mean, for PC players in particular, I assume diehard PlayStation fans maybe were aware of the delay, but as a PC player, like, I was totally oblivious to this game being. Well, I was totally oblivious to its release date at all, but you may have latched on to the notion that it was supposed to be out next week and missed any announcement of it being delayed. Because I assume that the reason I missed it in the news cycle was because it was a PlayStation 5 centric news story. So I just included it in the rundown just to make sure PC players were aware. But yeah, as far as I know, the only major release coming out next week is Night Rain.
We've also got F1 25 that comes out on the 30th as well. Figured I should mention that for one certain game logic.
Well, thank you, because that's actually exactly what I will be shifting to play, even though I didn't put it in the rundown. And that's the thing. It's, if you like it, I go to different sites to grab the upcoming game releases, and F1 25 is not listed like on every site. So
no, I find myself spending more and more time kind of combing through Steam's new upcoming releases just to catch things. And one of the other games that is coming out next week on the Steam list is Pipistrello and the Cursed Yo-Yo. So this is a kind of Zelda kind of top-down GBA, SNES type of style. I played it on Steam Next Fest last year. I think after the Summer Games Fest, and it is coming out now this summer, this week as well. So
Man,
let's go from a big game with Codemasters to this tiny little indie studio game as well.
Well, and I hate to make a lot of personal hoopla about, man, thank goodness for, I recanted my whole horror story about upgrading to the RTX 5080. But I hate to further extend the cap off on that story to the 30th, when the buyer, any buyer's remorse that I might have will be very effectively washed away by getting hold of F125 and being able to play it on my big 43-inch
as you set up F1. You'll be very glad for that. Yep. All right, Game Logic. Let's call it for tonight. I'm going to sneeze here before we head out. I can't even keep going here, but Hero Down Under, Nate, thank you for joining us. Priscilla T, so glad to have you. Got it. Thank you, Priscilla, for making my accepting my sneeze as well. So always glad to have people here joining us in the chat. And Game Logic, thank you for keeping us running and keeping us going. Oh, I'm so glad to be back. I will be back here next week with you all as well. So for myself, DBQ Hams and Game Logic, this has been episode 387 for the week of May 27th. Until next week, play the games you love those you play with, be kind to yourself. Good night, everybody.